Welcome to the Astro Guy podcast. I'm not an expert, I'm an amateur like you. I'm here to learn and here to teach. So let's enjoy the ride together. Carpe Noctem, seize the night. Welcome to the Astro Guy podcast. I'm your host, Wayne Zuhl, and in this episode, I sit down for an interview with an old friend, Pat Manley. We discuss all things amateur astronomy. So I hope that you enjoy it. So tonight, it's my pleasure to welcome Pat Manley to the Astro Guy podcast. Pat's our second live interview. I'm very excited about it. Pat and I met about 10 years ago up in Vermont at Stellafane. One of our shared interests is meteorite collecting, and the Meteorite men were speaking at Stellafane, and Jeff Notkin and I go back over 25 years from Meteorite men, and so it was a pleasure to have a friend come up and speak at Stellafane, and they did a presentation at the Hartness House. And Pat needed a ride. And so we gave him a ride. And that's how the friendship started. And we have a lot of things in common. Obviously, amateur astronomy, astrophotography, meteorite collecting. Pat makes beer. I drink beer. And actually, we're just up in not too far from you, but we'll talk about where you're from and all that. So why don't we dive into that? So let's start off with not what you do in astronomy. What do you do for your day job?
So I work as an IT architect with Lockheed Martin. I've done everything from programming, developing software development for web applications to, installing, complex, customizable off-the-shelf applications. So I've made quite the career in information technology over the years, and I'm a chief IT architect.
Wow.
One of the business areas in Lockheed.
And what part of New York do you live in?
I live in Binghamton, New York, which is due south of Syracuse, New York,
okay.
Right along the New York-Pennsylvania border. I actually live in a town called Endwell, all's well that ends well. And and it's just a small suburb, if you can call it that, of Binghamton, New York.
Okay, and how dark are the skies where you are?
Here, they're probably between where I am. I'm up on a hill, and I've got a lot of hill shading. So we're probably looking at a 5-6. It's not quite a city sky. It's pretty good.
Right.
I go to Copernic Observatory, which is probably a 4 to 5, somewhere in there. And then I have my own observatory, which is like a low 4. So.
Okay. Yeah, and we'll talk about those coming up.
Sure.
Yeah, I know where I am. I'm in a Bortle 7/8 zone, being 17 miles from New York City.
Right.
But you can still do a lot, even from the light polluted sky. So how did you get involved? How did you get the interest in astronomy and get involved as an amateur?
Oh, wow, that goes way back. And I actually, I don't have the dictionary. My wife's borrowing it. I have this 1970s Webster dictionary. And it had this section in the back of the dictionary that was about 40 pages long. And the dictionary came out along the time of the Apollo moon missions, right? And so they were really hyping up the whole space exploration thing. And I remember as a really young kid, I used to spend hours and hours and hours flipping through the pages of that back section of the dictionary, like in awe and wonder. So the interest sparked really early on. But oddly enough, I didn't get into amateur astronomy until I was in my 30s. I did a lot of internet armchair astronomy, following the NASA missions, doing a lot of reading and research and things like that on space flight and space exploration. But I never actually, once in a while I'd go out with binoculars, but I wouldn't really say the amateur astronomy spark didn't really hit until I was in my 30s. I do remember once, though, when I was in college, and I was out walking with a girlfriend, and we just went for a nice walk, and I saw the Pleiades up in the sky. And when we got back to the house, I remember going immediately indoors and grabbing binoculars and going out to look again at the Pleiades. I have really bad eyes, so I don't see the 7 big stars in there. I see this mass of glowing stuff, right? And so when I looked through it in the binoculars, it was just like, wow, that's amazing. So I think that was the moment when the seed was planted, but it was probably another 7-8 years before I wandered my way up to Copernic Observatory and bought a new pair of binoculars and saw the Andromeda Galaxy, and I was hooked from that point forward.
And binoculars, I know I always tell people binoculars are the best thing to start with. You know, don't waste money on a telescope, you know, if you haven't explored with binoculars.
Yeah.
You know, that's really the best advice I can give. And if there are certain telescopes you can get, like the Star Blast that we use for the library telescopes, and those are great first telescopes for people.
That was actually my first telescope, but mine was not the Star Blast, it was the Star Shoot. It was on an equatorial mount.
Okay.
But same idea.
Right. Yeah. So short little fast scope, you know, that's not real big, but you're going to see things with it, and it changes people's lives, and that's the fun of it. So that actually led to my next question, which was, you've got quite a bit of equipment, and yeah, I just want to dive into telescopes first. So you started with this little reflector.
Yeah, a little 4-inch reflector.
And then what did you graduate to after that?
The next thing I went to was, at the time, the Meade LX200R, you know, which oddly was an uneducated but an excellent purchase. I just said, okay, I really like this hobby. I'm really feeling it. I'm going to go out and spend some money now. It's not going to be a forever scope, but it's going to be a long ever scope, right? I'm going to run this thing for a while. And I still have that 8-inch to this day. I'm actually thinking I might turn that into my planetary scope, because I have horrible seeing here, and it'll play a little nicer with the seeing than my C11 does.
Yeah.
But, you know, so then I went to the LX200. Celestron was a few years later, about 5 or 6 years later, actually. Celestron was beginning to stop manufacturing in America. And I had already bought a Losbin G11. I've been piecing together the equipment that's in my observatory for well over 15 years, 12 years or so. And I was buying some high-end stuff. So I bought a Losbin G11 mount. And I, very shortly before they moved the manufacturing operations to China, I bought a C11. And that scope I use quite often in my observatory. Sometimes I take it on the road with me too. And I pretty much rode those scopes for probably right up until about March of 2015, 2014 or so. And I bought a New Moon telescope. I got a 16-inch Dob that you've probably seen at Stellafane. I always park it near it's a beautiful, I mean, it's furniture quality. It's just a gorgeous scope. And so I always park it near the walking trails, and you always see people wander over to it. It's kind of funny. It is a gorgeous scope, though. Ryan Goodson did a fantastic job on it. And then I started getting into astrophotography after I bought that. So maybe about 4 years later, I got an Explorer Scientific 127, a refractor to use for wide-ish field, right? Astrophotography. And then I graduated, I even went wider. I got a 102, Stellar View 102, which is an SVX 102T, which is a great, fantastic, amazing refractor.
Wow. And the Stellar Views are really nice, and those are pricey. But you get what you pay for with them.
Right. That's right.
And you know, it's like the Takahashis, you get what you pay for.
So that timeline, and then I have a variety. I have a 70 millimeter and a Red Cat 51, things I use for astrophotography. But that progression was probably over 18 years. I've probably been doing this for about 20-ish years or so, and so that whole progression occurred over about 18 years of time. And
before I dive into your experiences at Copernic, because that's really something I want to focus on. Oh God, I just raised my volume to 100%. You got some telescopes, and you started getting into things. And what was it that you enjoyed observing the most?
I was a big I like the entire Messier catalog. It's kind of funny. I was listening to somebody else on another podcast. So, it's funny. I always go to the same objects over and over again because I get a new telescope and then I want to see what all those objects look like through that telescope. So obviously I've spent a ton of time on the Messier objects. The ones that fascinate me the most are probably the globular clusters. I spend a lot of time. I seem to be naturally drawn to a globular cluster. So I spend a lot of time looking at those, especially the Messier ones, finding some of the harder to find ones in the NGC catalogs, right? Especially since I got the 16-inch. That's been a fun little, those smaller, visually they're hard to find. Actually, they're quite the challenge to pull those out. Like there's one by the Ink Spot Nebula, right? It's really hard to pull that out. But so I found a lot of joy in that. Of course, galaxies are just fascinating, right? Galaxy season's an amazing time for an astronomer, amateur astronomer, to get out there and spend a lot of time looking at the galaxies.
Yeah.
Recently, I've shifted over to nebulas, but that's because I'm doing more astrophotography, and that's where the challenge is, right? Is North American Nebula. I've got some crescent data that I've been, and the nice thing about the astrophotography is I've never spent a lot of time observing through other people's photographs, but I do observe through my own because you work really hard for them.
Yes, you do. You spend a lot of time to try to get something, and once you get it, you want to spend a lot of time looking at it and seeing what you got. Right. So
load it up in the Astrobin and let it go in there and identify all the objects. And I'm sitting there going, wow, look at this. This is really, and you actually observe through your own photographs. It's kind of neat.
It is. It's a great thing to do on cloudy nights, and cloudy nights is something we'll talk about it as well. So, you mentioned the globulars, and it's funny because my favorite objects are open clusters. I think there's so much character in open clusters, and you can see them. The fall obviously has, in my opinion, it's got some great, but there's great ones in the summer and really all year round. But I love those ones, those three in Auriga, the three M36, M37, and M38, or just an M37. Yeah, they're just, to me, they're a lot of fun, and they look good in pretty much any scope.
That's right.
So that's why I like those, but they're not as well. Some are challenging because sometimes they're hard to pick out from the background. Sure. But the Messier ones are pretty easy for the most part. But it's funny because you mentioned Copernic, and one of the things we're going to talk about is astronomy clubs. Where I grew up 3 blocks from a community college. Okay. And there's an observatory at the community college, and there's an astronomy club there, and this observatory has a 10-inch f/15 refractor that was built by club members back in the 1960s. It was actually one of the first telescopes in the world that used computer-aided design for the figuring of the optics. And they have a 24-inch RC as well. But again, they're 16 or so miles from New York City. Yeah. So having these great telescopes, it's wonderful, but you're very limited in what you can see there. But you learn a lot from the clubs. Now, before we dive into that, and like I said, I go off on tangents, but that's just me. You have your own observatory. So that's where correct. Is that? And tell us a little bit about what's entailed in so your observatory.
I don't even know if it's technically a town, but on the road map you can find Hickory Grove, Pennsylvania. It's along the northern border of Pennsylvania. It's about a half hour from my house here in Endwell, New York. And it's in a rolling hills area that's halfway between 2 small towns, Susquehanna, Pennsylvania, and Great Bend, Pennsylvania. And I don't get any sky glow or anything from those 2 towns because of the baffling of the hills and whatnot that I'm in the middle of. So it's a really nice, like I said, it's probably 4, low 4s, maybe a little bit below 4. It has one downside that it's really close to a river, so it gets a lot of fog. So I have to deal with that in the summer, but it's not, that's not too bad. Sometimes if the fog hangs low, it even makes it darker, right? So it's a really great spot. for where I am, for being close to my house. And it gets, like I said, it's a beautiful dark sky location. The property we bought, it had already had a farmer field in it. The trees were already cleared and everything from it. It was just an excellent place to set up at. So it's a really great time.
So you have a house there as well.
I have a cottage actually, is
Okay.
what's there. It was a guy's house many, many years ago. He moved away and it kind of went to disrepair, and we gutted it and we turned it into a nice little cottage in the middle of the forest.
And the observatory itself, tell us about that.
The house itself is pretty cool. Or the observatory, it's about 14 feet long. It has a roll-off roof, so I have to push the roof off and push it back on. It's basically a shed construction, a utility shed construction type of observatory. So it's an excellent observatory for my uses. I can probably stand up another pier in it if I really wanted to. I don't think I really want to.
I'm sorry, what'd you say the size was?
It's about 14 feet by 8 feet, 10 feet. I'm sorry, 14 by 10 roughly.
And a roll-off roof, correct?
Yeah, and a roll-off roof. Yeah. Just enough roof that I can push it off, right? If I made the if I made the place any bigger, I'd be buying a motor to get it off.
So it's not automated yet.
No, not yet. Not the roof. No, I have engines for it, but I don't have to. I can push it off now, so I'm good with that. I'm suspecting in 10 years or so I won't be able to do that though.
Well, I was just wondering if you were having it set up so you could do it remotely, so you wouldn't have to, drive there. You could just do it from home.
No, probably not.
No.
Probably not. I'll probably, because we have the cottage and stuff there,
Right.
kind of nice. And I have a network line run from the observatory, which is about 100 yards away from the cottage. I did run cabling all the way to it, so I do have a network there. So once I get the roof off right now, I can't control the whole thing remotely from inside the cottage.
Okay, that's very nice.
Yes.
So it's got you have the Losmandy G11 mount.
Yeah, I have a Losmandy G11, and it has it's an older one. Like I said, I bought it a long time ago, and I got it on a concrete pier. The concrete pier is not the best and most versatile way to go, but it does work. And then right now I have the SVX 102T on it, the Stellar.
Oh. So. Okay, I thought you might have the C11 on there.
No, big wide field nebula season, right?
Right. Yeah.
Horsehead, all of them, right? The Soul, the Heart.
Yeah, those are actually, you can't see it in the picture behind me, but the Heart and the Soul are in there. Not enough exposure time on them because that's only about 25 minutes behind me. But
I did the Crescent a couple weeks ago or a month ago or so. So it's wide field nebula season for sure.
Yeah. So the observatory really is your astrophotography spot.
That's right. Yeah.
Okay.
I have a small, it's like a 10-inch Orion Daub there that I use, or 12-inch. Yeah, it's a 12-inch that I got at a yard sale actually, and for a very good price, I might add. And so I kind of cleaned that scope up and fixed it up a little bit, and I can push that out into the yard and do some visual observing. Or sometimes I take my 16-inch down with me too, if I'm going to spend a week in there.
Nice, yeah. One of the things I'd like to get you back on another time, really just to talk astrophotography, but I really want to focus on some other things here today.
So there's a nice shot. Here's the concrete pier I was talking about. I have an elevated pier plate so you can level the plate off.
Nice.
Then you have this photo. It's hard for me to tell right now, but I think that's the Explorer Scientific, maybe. Hard to tell actually in this shot. But yeah, so that's the idea on it. And then I have I only control from the ladder and from the laptop. I do have a computer terminal. I'm just kind of flipping through trying to find a photo so you can see my setup. Here it is. So right on one of the walls of the observatory, I have a computer set up. Now, what's really unique on this setup is all run on Raspberry Pis. So that's kind of fun.
Tiny little boxes.
Yeah, so I have a Raspberry Pi here and I have a Raspberry Pi on the telescope. You may have noticed it in one of the other photographs there. So, you know, as you, and here you can see, let's see, where is it? It's kind of disorienting right now. It's on the other side.
This is the benefits of you being an IT architect.
That's right. That's right. Yeah,
Me, I have to go out and buy the,
so you can see
the ASI Air.
You can see the Raspberry Pi.
Oh, okay. Yeah.
Right. And so you have the Raspberry Pi right there, and it's controlling everything, the camera, the focus, everything.
So for people who don't know what Raspberry Pi is, you want to just explain real quickly what that is?
Yeah, sure. So you can buy a really good full setup ready to plug into a monitor computer for about $70. And that includes storage, cabling, the whole thing. And it is enough horsepower to do astrophotography data capture with. You're probably pushing it a little bit if you try to do planetary capture with it because of the data rates that you're pushing there. You can probably do it, probably not in August, but possibly in March, because you have to worry a little bit about heat with a Raspberry Pi. But that's one of the advantages of it. You can see my old one here. There's a black one. Okay. It's just a little teeny tiny box, fits in your hand.
I see you have the EFW, and which camera is that?
This is a 1600 Pro, but I have a 2600 Pro now.
Oh, nice. Nice.
Yeah. For the monochrome.
Yeah, those are for the people who don't know, those are monochrome astronomy cameras, very high end, not terribly expensive.
No.
I have the ASI 462 MC, the planetary camera.
Mm-hmm.
And I've gotten really nice pictures of the moon and the planets with it, but for my deep sky stuff, I'm using it's a modified Canon 60D that's been H alpha modified. So this is pictures you're showing now when you were building it. And did you built this yourself?
I did use a subcontractor. This is way outside of my skill set, right? So I did use a subcontractor to help me build do a lot of the carpentry work and whatnot. Yeah, I had a good realization that when you're working with stuff like building a roll-off roof, the IT geeks aren't exactly the right skill set. So it didn't take me very long to say, hey, I need a little help with this.
Yeah.
But there you can see the build where it's just on a rail, and the rail continues out onto the platform here.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'm jealous of your observatory, because that's something that
I tell you, if you want to build one, if you're going to do it, the idea is, like I said, I did mine well over 13 years. Right? Yeah. Get a good plan together, get a good design in your head, like the wood and all this stuff you can buy later, right? Or you could build up your supplies over time. But I bought the mount 2 years later. I bought some of the scopes that go on it, the pure plate I bought over time, right? That goes into the concrete, all the materials. Just slowly but surely, it's like a savings account, right?
If you did it all at once, your wife would have left you, right?
Possibly. I don't even know if she really knew I was kind of planning this, right? She may have.
She's very tolerant, and my wife is very tolerant too. So that those are good things. Before we really dive into the club stuff, which is really what and again the resources. I know you and I both are collectors of meteorites.
Yeah.
And a lot of people are amazed when I tell them that. They're like, "You have meteorites?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I have meteorites." And even my wedding ring and my wife's wedding ring are both have meteorite. They have Gibeon.
Oh, I never noticed that.
Yeah, cool. Yeah. I don't know if you can see it there, but the grayish material is the Gibeon. You can't see the.
Oh, that's cool.
It's the Widman-Staten pattern's not showing up in the camera here, but it's easily visible.
Great.
So yeah, that's to me, that was actually something I started back in the early 90s. I purchased my first meteorites, and I haven't found one on my own. Someday I'd love to, but it's like a lot of people who collect minerals and things like that. You go to these shows and you buy them, and you find reputable sources. And I saw recently you won a beautiful meteorite.
Yeah. It neef. That was kind of funny. Yeah,
Yeah.
very I was not suspecting that at all. I was
I,
sitting there. I didn't even know. I think it was Michael Rector on Twitter tweeted me, did a private DM to me and said, "Dude, you won the meteorite." And I'm like, "What?" He's like, "Yeah, you won the moon rock meteorite." And I just
that's
started laughing. I'm like, "Oh, no way!" And then I go, "Look, yeah, sure enough." And I got the email soon after that.
and
So
that's great because it's somebody who really appreciates it.
yeah,
So,
yeah.
so how many specimens do you have now in your collection?
I'm probably approaching 100. I'm not totally crazy. And some folks that's a weekend,
Right.
right? I don't buy a lot of larger ones. Mine are usually between hand sized and can fit them and hold them with two fingers. I don't usually buy the big ones as much as Jeff tries to get me to buy the larger specimens, right? I do avoid some of those temptations. I like rare things, like I bought a Steve Arnold had those slices of the moon, the lunar meteorites a few years ago with the green glass in them. I see stuff like that and I can't walk away from it. Right?
Yeah. Yeah, no, they're
They-
really a lot of fun. I know I've done some public outreach where I've brought meteorites with me, and the kids, they just love to hold on to them,
yeah.
and when they realize what it is, and not just kids, but anybody, they really appreciate what it is. And but anyway,
So yeah,
what?
I have a few ammo cans full, about 3 or 4 ammo cans full of meteorites. So.
Oh, okay. Yeah, mine actually, I have a big crate that has my collection in it. I have a few pieces I display,
Mm-hmm.
and we have a nice cabinet, in our dining room where we have those. But I sold off a few pieces during the pandemic.
Oh, during the pandemic. You bought one
During the
too.
pandemic, yes, you did. I was whenever I want to buy new equipment, I sell something off. That's my thing. So I had some autographed. People who know me know that I'm a huge Rush fan. So I had some prints that were autographed by the whole band, and I sold one of those. And I kept one. I sold one and kept one.
Okay.
When I sold off a couple of meteorites, I actually sold off a really beautiful Cicotoline. It was a thumb printed piece that stood up. I'm sure you've seen it because I know I've shown it to you.
Okay.
And I sold it for 10 times what I paid for it. So I
Right.
couldn't not sell it.
Especially those, right?
Yeah. And so that enabled me to buy a lot of the astrophotography equipment that I have now.
Okay.
But
Good.
what I want to do really now is talk about.
Your astrophotography equipment will not gain in value as time goes on.
No, that's true. That's true. But I'll get a lot of enjoyment out of it. And that's
right.
the important thing.
That's right.
So astronomy clubs. Now I talked about, I grew up, basically around the corner from an astronomy club. And I remember my first visit going to the observatory. I think I was 7 years old. And I wasn't even able to join the club until I was 14, which they've changed that rule. I think you can be younger now to join. But I'm still a member there. I've been a member since I was 14 in 1980, so that's when I joined.
No.
And I've been a member there ever since. And I'm qualified on both of the telescopes, although I haven't used. Well, it's been shut down, since the pandemic. But I haven't used either scope there probably in quite a few years, probably 15 years or so.
Okay.
And I need to retrain. The 24-inch telescope is now automated. It's all computer controlled now, where it used to be loosen the clutch and set the sidereal time, and you had your setting circles and you worked off of that. But
Right.
now it's all done on the computer, which is nice. But in my experience, there's a lot of value that comes out of astronomy clubs, and people who are just starting out in the hobby. The best advice I give them is find a local astronomy club, because there's people there that want to help you, and they'll help you learn. And you have to navigate through things. Every organization has its pluses and minuses, and sometimes things get uh, political is not the right word, but the politics of the behind the scenes of running an organization like that can be um, it can be unpleasant.
Yeah.
But if you get past that, there's a lot of value. And I'm a member of the club in New Jersey. Here it's Amateur Astronomers Inc. In Cranford, and there's several other clubs in the state. Actually, I want to join. There's another one that I'm active on their Facebook page, the North Jersey Astronomical Group, and they have the town where I live. They actually do their star parties. There's a park, an art park, which has a phenomenal western horizon.
Oh,
it's an old Nike missile base site, and it's now an art park. And
okay. That's awesome.
So a lot of times they go up there for star parties and things like that. And obviously, as you know, I'm a member up at Stellafane, the Springfield Telescope Makers, which is really a telescope making club, not an astronomy club. But it is nice going up there when it's not the convention. I was just up there 2 weeks ago, and looking through the Shutman without waiting in line is a joy. And that's a phenomenal telescope.
Yes.
You're a member of Copernic. Are there other clubs that you belong to?
I support a variety of clubs throughout New York State, upstate New York, basically. One of the areas, the Adirondack Sky Center up in Tupper Lake. I'm a member up there, that I actively support them. So I haven't been up there in years, actually, but I do support that. I've been, when I remember too, I register with the Syracuse Astronomical Society. And that is a good group. They got a nice facility there in Tully, New York, which is a quite little ways south of Syracuse. So it gets somewhat out of the light pollution from Syracuse. Then we have Copernic Astronomical Society here in the Binghamton-Vestal area. So, and I used to be a member of the Dudley Observatory out of Albany, and there's I don't remember their name, but Alan French's group there that meets up in Schenectady. I think they're just the Albany Astronomical Society or something like that.
Yes. Yeah.
I was a member of that for a few years too. Actually, now that you asked that, I got to shake the pandemic off and start getting active with those other local clubs again. So we try to support a bunch of the members and I of Copernic. We try to become members of the other clubs as well.
And how many members are in the Copernic organization?
It's hard to gauge because there's probably, so in Copernic Observatory, you automatically qualify as a member of the Copernic Astronomical Society if you want to, by becoming a Copernic Observatory member, Observatory and Science Center. So there's a great number of those folks, but they're generally not that active. They might show up for some of our KAS only activities, our Public Friday activities, but they're not really interactive. I would say the Copernic Astronomical Society right now is maybe around 15 to 20-ish active members. We actually grew a lot through the pandemic. So we took advantage of Zoom and technologies like this, and we've actually recruited a lot of members. We also have what I call honorary Copernic, KAS members. They range from anywhere down closer to you in like the Philadelphia area, up into the Hershey, PA area. Some of the folks from the Harrisburg Astronomy group that, they'll dial into our Zooms and hang out with us. And whenever you see us, if you see us at Stellafane or Cherry Springs Star Party or whatever, we have a very large group that goes, but only about half of that group that's hanging out together is actual KAS members.
Right.
So we have a bunch of honorary members, as I call them.
And what's the observatory they're equipped with?
I'm sorry. Oh, the observatory, it has an astrophysics 6-inch f12. They used to call it the planetary killer back in the days. And it's a really great telescope for observing brighter things. We have a C14 edge, and then we have a 20-inch Optical Guidance Systems, Ritchie, which is a really great telescope for imaging.
Nice.
And that's where if I do that large aperture imaging, that's usually the scope I'll go to.
How dark are the skies there?
It's probably hanging out at a 5. It really depends on the weather. If it's hazy out, it's probably up at a 4 to 6, because cities are right there, but it's up on a hill elevated. So the Bortle, it can really fluctuate quite a bit with the weather. If it's a hazy sky, it's probably about a 6. It does pick up the city lights from a distance. If it's crystal clear, it's probably like a high 4.
And just to put a little pin on this, here it is. We're recording this on November 18th, and my alarm is going to go off in about 5 hours.
Yeah.
Because I'm hoping to go out, well, maybe 6 hours.
Clear all those clouds out for us,
Yeah,
right?
I'm hoping that the clouds, the predictions are that the clouds are supposed to clear here between 3:30 and 4. So that works well. What's the predictions for you? Is it looks
So
like
we're about a 50 right now. If I look on clear sky if I look on clear sky, it's probably about a 50% starting at 3. It improves a little, but there's going to be some degree of coverage, but there's holes. Like when I look at the map, you can see there's a lot of holes around us, so it could go either way.
Yeah, I'm hoping that the
I got
weather
a place to drive to, so
yeah, I'm hoping that the weather cooperates. And actually, if I go out in my front yard, I have a pretty good horizon to the west.
nice.
So I should be able to just set up in my driveway. And my goal for the eclipse is just to go out there with a 200 millimeter lens in my camera and try to get some decent pictures.
Nice.
Years ago, back I think in 2003. I think it was 2003. There was a lunar eclipse that I got a nice picture of. I got that copper color and it wasn't even, I think I held my camera up to the eyepiece on my Teleview Pronto.
Nice.
And just handheld, and I was able to get that image. So I kind of cherish that one, but I think I can, with a tripod and the camera and the 200 millimeters, the moon's not going to be that big anyway. So
there was one in 2016, 2018. It was kind of funny. I took my DSLR and I had my 200 millimeter zoom, and I was all set. And we were driving back from the Outer Banks in North Carolina, and the eclipse was like in the evening. It was really like a really convenient time. And I went and I had my camera and I took it out and I forgot my tripod. And so it got really fun.
Well,
got really funny because I went over to the building and I pinned my camera up against the building, right? And then I put it up there and I was doing longer exposures and I actually got some really good shots. But what was really funny is the lady who was like working the hotel that night, she comes out and she's like, "What the heck are you doing?"
I'll tell you, I had a very similar story. Something happened. It was the partial lunar eclipse. Partial solar eclipse that happened. What was it, June 6th or?
Sure.
Yeah, just this year. It was June 10th. We went to Sandy Hook, which is a national park, a federal park. We get there at 5 a.m, before the sunrise, and there's a line to get in. And fortunately, they weren't charging for parking, which was nice. And we got there, and I take my stuff out of the car, and I realized I left my tripod at home.
Oh, no.
So my wife and we dragged our chairs, and I had my solar binoculars. And I just handheld the camera with the 200 millimeter zoom. This was the very first picture that I took of that day. And
oh, that's awesome.
I was actually a little upset because there was people in the foreground. And then after a day or so, I realized, that really makes the picture.
Yeah.
And they were oblivious. to the fact that there was this eclipse in front of them. Now, because the camera's hydrogen alpha sensitive, that's why there's
Right.
so much red.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
that was a great, I mean, it was a beautiful morning, and we had the clouds, and the moon, the sun did disappear in the clouds for a little bit, but just seeing that was just really just I had this blown up to like I think 18 by something, or it's hanging in my bedroom now. But that was my forgotten tripod story.
It's a great
So
job.
thank you. So resources were the other thing that I wanted to talk about, because as amateurs, a lot of times, especially when you're out in the field, um, sometimes you have to rely on what's on your phone. And when you're not out in the field, then it's a night where you're not able to image or observe. There's some fantastic online resources. So are you active on cloudy nights?
I do use cloud. I'm not horribly active. I'm somewhat active. I'm more of a lurker than a
Okay.
poster. But I do ask questions on there from time to time. Like when I see an article and I'm curious about something, I'll ask questions and whatnot and get involved. But generally, I mostly lurk on there and do research. And I'm having a problem with my Raspberry Pi. It's a great place to go look for.
Yeah, the forums they're really rich. It's a free site to use for the people who don't know, and it has a phenomenal classified section where I've been able to sell things. I just put up recently. I just put a focuser up, and within 10 minutes, I had 9 different people message me they wanted to buy it.
Yeah, right now.
Yeah. Well, it was a GSO Crayford.
Okay.
And I sold it for more than I paid for it.
Yes.
And
enjoy it. That's your supply chain, taking
yes,
advantage of the supply
exactly.
chain flows.
Yeah. And
Good
the buyer
you
happened to be
wrong
local.
on my earlier statement, right?
Yeah. Yes. Yeah. So I would lucked out because the buyer was local. So
that's even better.
I put it on at 7 o'clock at night, and by 8:30 that night, I had the money in my hand.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, it was wonderful. And I actually have a few things up there now, but
one thing I did do a review of my new moon telescope that's posted on Cloudy Nights.
Oh, nice.
One active contribution I made to theirs, doing a review of that.
Yeah, so the gist of Cloudy Nights is a lot of different forums, and there's it has the classified section, but it's just a great place to ask questions and learn. And in my experience there is, I think people they tend to be very polite. Or some of these Facebook groups, that's not always the case.
That's right.
That's true. But people are much more helpful to me, it seems, on Cloudy Nights, and they really have everything. And they even have the off-topic section if you want to post about your pets or an unrelated hobby, which is kind of fun. And you mentioned the clear sky. The clear sky clock is one of my go-to resources. And you can put in your location, or many places they already have locations set up that are in their database. You can just pull them up. So if I know that I'm going to be going out to if I know I'm going to Stellafane for the weekend, I can look up what the weather is going to be in Stellafane on the clear sky clock, and it'll tell me. And they're seeing it rates the seeing, which for planetary work is really helpful. There's been nights where it's clear and I look at what the seeing is and it's so bad, and I'm shooting over a road and there's houses with heat on, so the seeing is even worse in many of those cases. But I'll tell you, one of my favorites, there's several that I use on my phone. There's one called Mobile Observatory, which I don't know if you're familiar with that one.
I think I do have that one. Yeah.
That one's great. It's got so much in it.
I've had that one in the past. I don't right now.
Yeah, I like it. It's got the live view, like, Google has their Google Sky, but it's a little more robust than that. But I like it because it has the Galilean moons and the moons of Saturn, so you can get the positions, you can see where the red spot is.
Right.
It's got great things on all different kinds of things on the sun.
I'm a
On
paid. I like SkySafari.
Oh, okay.
I bought that many moons ago, and they're actually just finally releasing a new version. But I bought that many moons ago, and I use that for planning, for astrophotography planning, object selection, you name it. It's a great, extensive application with a lot of data in it.
Yeah, when I look at my folder, I mean, there's all, it's hard to see there but those are just the astronomy apps on
Yeah,
my phone.
same.
And Night Shift is a great one.
Mm-hmm.
That's really good for weather, and letting you know how to what the not just the weather, but that also covers the seeing conditions, and
There's an
it
application
takes
out
the
there.
moon into account.
There's an application out there called Polar Finder,
Mm-hmm.
and it supports a whole bunch of polar finder scopes. So that if you have a polar scope on your equatorial mount and you have to do a polar alignment, it'll show you where Polaris should be for getting it perfectly aligned. That saves a ton of time.
Yeah. The one I use for that is called Polar Aligner Pro.
Okay.
And I like that because I can put it on the saddle of the mount, and
Right.
it just tells me go 2 degrees this way and 1 degree that way, and it gets me pretty close. If I do I'm using a Skywatcher mount. So if I do a 2-star alignment, if you do the 2 or 3-star alignment with the Skywatcher mount, it will tell you how far your polar alignment's off.
Yeah.
And you can do that 3 or 4 times and get your polar alignment really good. And where I observe from, I can't see Polaris. My house blocks Polaris, so the view to the north is just trees and my neighbors, and the view to the south is good. But so I rely on I use a GPS based compass to find true north, and then I just use the leveling tools, like the Polar Aligner Pro, to try to tweak it as best I can. I haven't really been, I'm not guiding, so I'm tracking but not guiding, and that's the next step in the process, is to start adding guiding in. And
I actually just added guiding into my workflow. I'd been using periodic error control in the Lozman G11.
Mm-hmm.
And that did pretty good, but I couldn't get to 5 minutes. I'd start getting big puffy stars.
Right. Yeah.
Guiding got me nailed. I can do 5 minutes, no problem. So.
Oh, that's fantastic.
10 minutes, actually.
Wow. Yeah, I'd love to get to that, but some of the other, like, even when I'm doing photography, there's a flat frame app that you can use on a phone or a tablet, and it just lights the whole screen up white, which, don't do that when you're out in the field at a star party. But if you need to take a flat field image,
that's great.
You take that, and although I don't have any white t-shirts around, so I actually use a piece of paper, and that seems to work pretty well for the flat fields.
Sure.
But so obviously there's Heavens Above, which is great for telling you about satellites. And then you mentioned Astrobin before, which is another very popular resource. More so, I think that's more geared for the astrophotography nuts. But just as an observer, you can say, hey, I'd love to see this, and it's not going to look like that, but it's still a good resource because it's got the basics of what's up there, so you can kind of get a feel for. Yeah, and well, the other thing that's nice about it is it's a great way to source an observing list.
Yeah.
You know, you can go on there and go, all right, I want to see this, or I want to image this, and you have that to go by.
If you love astrophotos, but you don't want to go through all the grief of making your own astrophotos, Astrobin is the place for
Yes.
you.
Yeah. What I've learned is that my
It's way
images,
cheaper too.
yeah, yes, yeah, it is. The other app that I use a lot is Clear Outside. So yeah, you notice I mentioned, I think, 3 different weather apps.
Yeah. And Astrospheric. Don't forget Astrospheric.
Yes, yeah, Atmospheric is on here.
And they all say different
Night
things
Shift,
some
yes,
nights.
they do. And I don't know if they have this for you, or but the Clear Sky Clock for me, and I know it doesn't have it for the Clear Sky Clock for Stellafane.
Mhm.
But the Clear Sky, I use the one for Newark, New Jersey, which is, you know, about 8 miles, 10 miles away from me. But I use that one, and it lists not just the regular cloud forecast, but there's a European cloud model
Mhm.
that they include in that as well. And I know that some sites it doesn't use that.
It depends if the Clear Sky chart is sponsored or not. If it's
Ah,
sponsored, if somebody's paying for that chart, like our Astro Society donates to Attila Danko to, you know, for his efforts and everything, then you get added bonus features, including the European model.
oh, okay. So that's pretty cool, because the European model tends to be a little bit more accurate
Mm-hmm.
than
I think it
the American
depends on
model.
the area you live, because we don't experience that here.
Oh, okay. That's
Yeah.
interesting. I think maybe because I'm closer to the coast, that may have an impact.
But I could literally bring up all of those, you know, the Canadian weather, the European model, and then, you know, Clear Outside and Astrospheric, and they're all using different data sources. The only thing I can say where I live is one of them will be right that night.
You just got to pray that you pick the right one.
That's right.
You know?
One of them will be correct that night.
Yeah, I think for me, one of the most frustrating things is, you know, I follow these apps, and I'll go out and I'll set up the scope. You know, I set up the mount during the day, and then lately I've been using a C8 for my planetary imaging and lunar imaging. And you know, I get the C8 set up, I get everything balanced, I get it, you know, I find a couple of stars and get it aligned, and then I, you know, get the cameras on there and start doing that, and then the clouds roll in. And that's happened more times than I can count.
So I actually recently at Copernic gave a presentation on that, right? Like all those things you're talking about doing, I actually try to assemble as much stuff as I can when I put it in the car, you know,
Right.
or whatever. Or if I'm at home, it's in the garage. As soon as we get done here, I'm going to assemble my equipment for the lunar eclipse tonight, right? And I have boxes, I have everything organized. I actually am kind of crazy. I practice putting my gear together in the dark without a flashlight, you know, so that I really get to know what I'm doing, right?
Wow.
From by feel. So
I watched your presentation.
I can get it down to 20 minutes. So whatever scope I'm setting up, I am up and running in 20 minutes.
Wow.
So, I hustle.
The presentation that you just mentioned, I actually watched it. I think you had posted it on Facebook, and I watched it. Yes, it was on. Yeah, you're right. It was on YouTube, and I watched that presentation, and I'm like, man, I wish I was as organized as Pat, because there's no way. You know, I have cables all over the place, and
yeah,
you know, I'm hunting around looking for something, and where did I put this, and you know, where's this? I was going nuts the other day looking for an Allen wrench.
Yeah,
you know,
well, my organization is a true testament to just how cloudy it is in Binghamton, New York.
But one of the things that I love that you do is the way you have different sets of cables.
That's right.
And the way that you I guess you use Velcro to bind them, you know, to you know, keep everything bundled together so it's nice and neat. Oh, there you go.
Yeah, I could take the thing off, but yeah, I was working on one here for my new camera rig that I'm putting together.
Yeah, that's amazing to me. That's just I someday I hope to reach your level of organization.
Well, every minute. So for me, I joke about the cloudiness here, right? But for me, every minute of capture time I lose is really precious and valuable to me, because we don't get a lot of, Binghamton, New York is well known for its rain, and Syracuse, New York, central New York is well known for its rain and its cloudiness and everything. So this is not the ideal place to be doing amateur astronomy in. So when you get those dark window, clear nights in this area, you don't want to waste time on a cable snag.
Right.
You lose 10, 15, 20 minutes of capture time on a cable snag. There's just nothing more frustrating than that. Right. Or an inoperable broken cable, right? Stuff like that.
Yeah, having back, and that's a really important thing, even just for observing, is to have backup things ready. You have to be prepared when you're out in the field. Whether it's batteries or making sure you have tools with you, all kinds of different things. You need to be prepared because you never know what's going to happen. But going forward, what do you have? Here we are, we're coming into the cold weather, into the winter. What do you have planned coming up with your observatory and your forays into the hobby?
Yeah, so I go to Copernic a lot. My cottage and it's a dirt road that's not managed or maintained by a town or anything like that. It's a private road, so it doesn't get plowed. So the first thing that I've done to get ready for the season is I dusted off the snowshoes, because if I can't drive up to it, I have to hoof up to it. So I did get the snowshoes dusted off. I do go to the Copernic Observatory a lot more in the wintertime, because that is plowed and it's easier to get to. But I do go to my observatory during any dark window. I have to make sure I do it in the daytime so I don't turn into an icicle, right? Because it is about a 2-mile hike. So
wow.
Yeah, so a little bit more planning in the wintertime for me. I once I get up there, I typically spend the whole weekend there no matter what. So I'll be getting ready for that. I am building a wide field rig that I can take with me anywhere right now. And it's got I have a one-shot color camera hooked onto it.
Nice.
So kind of looking for getting that rig pulled together so I can use that for the wintertime and get it. That's the cable harness I was working on. So I'm getting that set up. It's just going to be a 60 millimeter scope, refractor, small William Optics scope that I've had for years.
Those are very nice. The Williams Optics stuff, real high quality.
Yeah, it's a good little scope. I got it for a good price too, from a friend. So I'm gonna make sure that I get that put to use this winter. And then I don't know. I tend to do a lot more visual observing actually in the wintertime because I go to Copernic more. Mm-hmm. And I got all that beautiful gear there. We got 2 of the scopes are visual. One of them, the 20 inches, astrophotography only. And so I'll go get a job running in the 20 inch and I'll spend a lot more time on the 6 and the 14, depending what I want to look at that night. Do I want to go wide field or do I want to hone in on it? And if it's not too bad outside, I'll set something up in the yard, wide field, like the color rig I was just telling you about. So I'll definitely keep busy. I haven't gotten to the point where all my equipment is ready for the cold. Being in upstate New York, it gets really cold up here, right? Like we'll spend a great number of days below 10 degrees Fahrenheit. So, a lot of the equipment I have found, including in my own observatory, the grease and things like that start to fail. They start to gum up and you start to get drive problems, right around 15, 18 degrees Fahrenheit. So I'm probably going to start, I don't know if you know TJ Connolly or not, an astrophotographer from, mm-hmm. Up by Tupper Lake. Mm-hmm. He turned me on to some grease that's it holds up in low temperatures. So I'm going to be doing that to my mounts, cleaning out the old grease and putting this new grease that TJ turned me on to. So start winterizing the gear, so to speak, creating heat sources for the handheld computers and things like that. If you pay attention to TJ's Facebook page at all, he'll put his classic photograph of his telescope up where he's at. It's even colder than where I'm at. He's about 4 hours north of me, right? So he his entire rig would just be covered in frost, and you're like, "What? How is that thing still working?"
Yeah, I know they've already had snow up there.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
This, like I said, my friend he's got a cabin up there, and he goes up there, a lot of weekends, and he really likes the club that's there.
Hmm.
They do some really great presentations, and they have a beautiful facility.
Yeah, they do. It's gonna
Um,
get more beautiful.
yeah, yeah, and that's really what I wanted to. I think we hit the main points, which were uh, obviously the clubs and the benefits of the clubs. And look, this was just a fun for me anyway. I hope it was fun for you.
No, I had a great time.
Just to sit and chat, because clearly we're friends. We've
Mhm.
known each other for a long time, and we certainly share a lot of common interests. So I would tell you, if you're ever in New Jersey, I'm happy to hopefully get you back into, once they open it up, the observatory that's down here.
Yeah, that
And
would be awesome. That'd be a
you
lot of
know uh, one of these months, when I go up to Stellafane for a non-convention meeting, we lucked out, really. Like I said, we were just up there 2 weeks ago, and it was cold, but it was beautifully clear.
Oh,
And
that's great.
the
Travel all
only
that way and get a clear night. That's always
Yeah, well, we had two clear nights actually, but we had the meeting the second night, and I don't want to make my wife sit out in the car, and while I was out there taking pictures in the cold.
sure, sure.
So I just did the one night of imaging, but it was well worth it. And
It's great.
there's so much fun to be had and so much to learn. And these clubs are really just a phenomenal resource. And it's funny, in here in New Jersey, there's actually a group that was started about 30 years ago. I was actually their first treasurer when they started, called United Astronomy Clubs in New Jersey, and it was kind of meant like an umbrella organization,
Hmm.
like a mini astronomical league almost. But what happened was, there was a state park, there was property that was adjoining a state park that was purchased by the park, but they wanted to utilize it for public outreach. So we were able to finagle that to become an observatory. So there's a house on the site, which the bottom of it, it's a bi-level house. So the ground floor, this is the realtor coming out and me talking about the style of the house, but the ground floor is a museum and a classroom, where they can do lectures and things like that. And they have a nice museum display with some meteorites and some other things. And then the upstairs, it's really just like it's bedrooms, and there's a little bit of furniture, but the intent was that people could stay overnight, and observe. And there's it's got to be 7 or 8 permanent observatories up there now,
Oh
and
wow, that's great.
they're all roll-off roofs.
Oh god, that's cool.
Yeah, there's I know that there's a 16-inch scope in one of them. That's the UACNJ one.
Hmm.
And then I know my club has a C14, and there's several other scopes that other clubs have. And it's a pretty cool site. It's got a really great southern horizon. The only negative, there's a cell tower that's a few hundred yards away.
Okay.
It's got a beacon, but it's a red
Uh,
beacon, so it's not as bad.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Uh, but I mean, I was up there for, I remember going up there. This is again back in the 90s. It was Comet Yakutaki, and it for 2 or 3 days, it was pretty close to the Earth, that comet, and the tail was visually, I was able to see the tail for almost 100 degrees.
That's awesome.
And it was and Hale Bopp was just amazing up there, where that was amazing pretty much anywhere you went. But having a dark sky site, or and that's like a Bortle 4 site.
Hmm.
So for New Jersey, that's about as good as it gets.
Right.
It's
That's really good. Yeah.
yeah, for New Jersey, it's good. And you go up to Stellarfane's about a Bortle too.
Hmm.
I was talking to a friend of mine. I don't know if you know Tony Costanzo, who owns Astronomy Shop. He's got some land in Maine that's almost a Bortle one site,
Hmm.
and he just cleared a lot of land to make it usable
That's where I was.
for amateurs. But
I
that's a
did.
haul. Maine's a haul.
Uh-huh. Yes. It is.
For the New England people, it's easier. But for if you're coming from where you are or where I am, it's a bit of a haul. So the other thing that we talked about very briefly was NEAF, which is the Northeast Astronomy Forum,
Mhm.
and that's a phenomenal event. It's a vendor. It started off as a vendor show, and it's morphed into so much more than that. It's got to be the largest vendor show, at least on the East Coast. Um, I know Riverside used to be a big vendor show. I don't know that it is anymore out in California, but I remember I went to I think the first 10 years that they did NEAF, I was at each one.
Mhm.
Uh, the first one I remember going to, the first one was actually at Rockland Community College, but it was in the lobby
At the
of,
Holiday Inn. Yeah.
yeah. Well, no, it was in the college, but the
Oh, it
whole thing
was.
was in the lobby.
Okay.
There was maybe 6 vendors, and then they had a room off to the side where they were doing lectures. But now they have that whole gym, which is humongous,
Mhm.
and it's just wall to wall vendors in there.
Yeah.
And I tell people, if you're thinking about buying any equipment, go there,
Mhm.
because uh, all the dealers are there, and you can talk to the people from Software Bisque or from Astrophysics or pretty much any of the big companies. Teleview certainly has a huge presence there, because that's their home. The Al Nagler, that's his home club.
That's right.
uh, but it's a wonderful show. And one of the things that they have, I mean, they get great lecturers, they get great speakers. Last year they actually had a moonwalker,
Mhm.
although last year it was over Zoom,
Yeah.
uh, which was, but I think pretty much everything was over Zoom last year. Uh,
It's
but they
pretty
had,
interesting, actually. At NEAF, one of the things that I find that's cool about it is it's a great place for people with these common interests to meet up together. I have a group that's really into the loaded with space enthusiasts. Like rocket launches and in the prior shuttle launches, a great number of them. And I went on a tweet up for the STS 132 Atlantis launch,
uh,
and we got to know each other really well there. And every year there's this group of us, so we call it the NEAF posse, right? And we all get together there, and it's really funny. Out of that group, there's me and maybe half another person who's actually interested in astronomy. Um, but that ties into what you were saying, right, about all the presenters and whatnot. It's a lot more than an amateur astronomy show nowadays.
yeah, yeah, and
It's a lot more than that.
one of the things they have that's big there is the imaging conference.
Mhm.
And I think this year, yep, I think this year I'm actually going to go to the
Oh, you
imaging
should. It's a
conference.
great
Yeah,
time.
yeah, it's something I really want to do now that I'm really starting to get into imaging.
Mhm.
I've gotten into the 21st century with that. Uh, and like I said earlier, the the imaging is, I mean, it used to be very mysterious how to do it. And now with YouTube, and that's another resource that I should have mentioned, is there's so many great channels on YouTube.
Mhm.
Astro Backyard, was it Nebula Photography?
Yeah,
Yeah,
Nebula. Yeah,
that one's
Nico.
very,
Yeah,
yeah.
Nico's
um,
great. Trevor's
yeah,
great.
yep, yeah, there's just so many really good
Star
resources
stuff
on
with Dylan
YouTube.
O'Donnell. That's
Yes,
fun.
yep, yeah. I know anytime I get a new piece of equipment, or I want to do a new technique, I go on YouTube and I watch people do it. And that's how I've learned to
Yeah,
do like the
Galactic Hunter,
imaging. And
another one. They're really good.
yes, yep,
Very
yeah.
good.
So there's a lot of really good uh, tools out there. And it's not like it was when I was 20. where all you had was Sky and Telescope magazine and Astronomy magazine, and you had to go get books. You had the Wilman Bell books, which were helpful, but now and it's changing so quickly because of the technology, the computers, the cameras. ZWO has really changed the face, in my opinion, at least. They've changed the face of they've made it affordable, and their quality is really excellent. A friend of mine's actually a beta tester for ZWO.
Okay.
And he gets this equipment in, and he gets to play around with it, and it's kind of fun seeing all the different things and learning it. And but I'm glad that you've you had the experience of looking up and seeing something and getting binoculars and being blown away, and I think that's all it takes.
That's right.
That's enough to get the bug going.
Even like I said, with that whole thing with the Pleiades, you just M45, you're looking up there at it, and you're looking at it and just wondering, what is that? Like, my eyes weren't good enough to make it out, right? It just had me enthralled. I was hooked, right? I ran inside, grabbed the binoculars so I could see, what is that?
Yeah. Have you seen all the objects in the Messier catalog?
I don't have a checklist going. I think I got a couple in the southern sky there. I've done a few years ago, I did the Messier Marathon from Copernic, and there were 3 that I couldn't do that you had to catch early, and you had to catch, they're real low in the south
right
at that time. I don't think I've ever gone back to finish those off in the winter time, right? So when you can actually see them. So
right.
I think M73, is that one of them? I think there's a couple of them there that I've never checked off on a checklist. So
yeah. There's it was a long time ago. I did a Messier marathon, and we actually got, I think the most I've done in a night was about 90.
Okay.
Which is
I've had
a
few
lot.
that run work nights, and I did 70.
Yeah.
And I had to quit and go get some sleep before work.
Right. Exactly. So, Pat, I want to thank you for spending some time with me, and catching up and talking about stuff that we love. And again, like I said, hopefully down the road, we can do this again. Maybe focus on imaging or something else, maybe meteorites even. I'm thinking down the road, I'd like to do a panel discussion and maybe get Jeff or Steve on here, and Jeff Cintron as well, and a couple other people. And I mean, they're great guys, and to just the stories they have are just ridiculous.
I'm a hack compared to them, so I'd love to sit on a panel with them.
Well, yeah.
I don't know if you'll get the 4 of us talking about meteorites. So I think that's the big problem.
Well, yeah, no, you're right. We'd end up talking about scotch or beer. You know who else is really good with that is Peter. I'm drawing a blank on his name. Scharf, Peter Scharf.
Yeah, Peter Scharf.
He's got an amazing collection.
Yes, he does.
And he's not really an astronomy guy. He's a meteorite collector, and he's got just a wonderful collection. He also has a wonderful restaurant in Springfield, Massachusetts.
Oh, really? I didn't know that.
Yeah, German place called the Student Prince.
Really?
Yeah, phenomenal restaurant.
Huh. I'm up near that way. So
So anyway, let me wrap this up. I want to again thank you, Pat, for spending some time, and it was a real pleasure. And I look forward to doing this again with you in the future.
That sounds good. Thanks for having me, Wayne.
I'm Wayne Zool, and this was the Astro Guy podcast. Thank you for listening. As always, your questions, comments, and suggestions are welcome. Keep wondering. Keep your eyes on the sky. Have fun. Carpe noctem. Seize the night.